Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. Well, the art world has many fairs throughout the year. There actually aren't very many in January. Perhaps the most noteworthy is ArtSG, which just wrapped up in Singapore. The Singapore art market has continued to develop over the last several years, but interestingly in many ways is overshadowed by a focus on other regions in Asia, like Hong Kong, mainland China, and Korea. So how did this year's edition of the fair go? It just concluded, and in this week's episode of the podcast, we're joined by Vivienne Chow, London correspondent and co-author of the Asia Pivot for Artnet News. Vivienne was there on the ground, and she shares an update on how the fair went, as well as the broader state of the art market in Singapore. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Vivienne, it's great having you back on. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Adam. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I know you just got back to London from Singapore, so we really appreciate you taking some time and helping us recap this year's edition of the fair. So interestingly, in past years, there were two distinct fairs, ArtSG and C-Focus. And for our listeners who aren't familiar, this year they actually merged and occurred during the same time. Can you explain each fair's identity, how they differ, and why they decided to come together now?
The Singapore city-state in Asia, and for years they've been trying to be an position themselves as an art hub, one of the art hubs in Asia, and the fair scene has been. I think it has gone through many ups and downs over the years. And so for those who are not familiar, previously there was this art fair called Art Stage, and it ran for a number of years, and then eventually it shut down quite abruptly. And then ArtSG inaugurated in 2023, and it positions itself as an international fair, quote unquote, in Singapore. And C-Focus, on the other hand, is a smaller boutique kind of fair/curated exhibition. And for the past few years, these two, they operate separately, and they have been located in separate venues. ArtSG is located at the Marina Bay Sands, these huge convention halls, and C-Focus has been located in different places, and most recently at Tanjong Pagar District Park, which is where Singapore Art Museum is. And I always enjoy going to these two fairs, and then particularly C-Focus, because it's always quite nicely curated, and I also like to check out the art scene from the artists from Southeast Asia. So I think C-Focus is a very nice platform, and I always find interesting works there and interesting artists. So this is the first time that the two events are happening at the same time, and also C-Focus, previously organized by STPI, which is a gallery / a creative workshop specializing in print. So this time, ArtSG is also organizing C-Focus, and the two events are happening together at Marina Bay Sands. And as for the reason why they're coming together, there hasn't been an official explanation. But then, if we look at the numbers, then I think it's quite obvious on why these two are coming together. So in 2023, when ArtSG was launched, it featured 164 exhibitors. And then in 2024, the number of exhibitors was down by 30% to 114. And then in 2025, it had 105 exhibitors. So the number of exhibitors has been going down. And and so there's a lot of space at the convention hall. So I think it also makes it makes sense to bring C-Focus to RSG so that you have a more concentrated how should I say, concentrated presentation. And I looked up the numbers. So the number of exhibitors of ArtSG, there are about 90. And then C-Focus had 16. So total 106. So I think in terms of operation, it kind of makes sense. And also some galleries said that it makes sense for the two events to take place under the same roof so that people don't have to move around, because the Tanjong Pagoda District Park is a little bit out of the way, so you need to cab. You can't walk in Singapore because it's so hot. If you walk, then you'll be melting. and I think I enjoyed it. There are some interesting booths as usual, and I think C-Focus is also I think it is identity. It retains its identity despite it's become a part of ArtSG, and some galleries they're showing at both. They have a booth at ArtSG and also a presentation at C-Focus. So I think to visitors, I think it's a nice experience.
So I think in this climate, galleries are becoming much more selective about which fairs they're participating in. They just really don't want to gamble. You think about all of the costs associated with doing a fair. All of the employees, the staff have to go there, all the shipping of the artworks, the booth costs, the entertainment, the hosting. There's just so many costs associated with doing an art fair. And unless a gallery is extremely confident that it's going to go well, in this climate, I think they're less likely to participate. So I think it's interesting to look at exhibitor lists for art fairs and see how they compare to maybe a few years ago. Looking at the exhibitor mix at ArtSG this year, how would you characterize the group of galleries? Was it primarily Asian or regional galleries? Or was there still a strong Western presence? I mean, I think about the market, but I also think about the more competitive landscape of art fairs in Asia. We have Basel, Hong Kong, we have Frieze Seoul, we have so many others, and Western galleries just can't do all of them.
I think for galleries, they will have to be very selective, and especially going to expensive places like Singapore. It is an expensive city, and I mean, even coming out from London. I mean, London is not cheap, but then but they're arriving in Singapore. Yes, I think there are some other affordable options. I mean, in terms of the expenses, but overall, Singapore is not a cheap place. So I think people, when it comes to decision on whether to travel all the way to do a fair in Singapore, I think galleries must have a lot of considerations, and I think the overall presentation. For me, I would say it's more of a regional, kind of a regional fair, and that's nothing wrong with it. And I think it also makes sense. To have a regional fair focusing on Southeast Asia, because Southeast Asia is such a complex region, and it's very difficult for people from outside. I think not just outside of Asia, but even for people in Asia. It's just really hard to summarize Southeast Asia. Like, what is Southeast Asia? No one can explain that in one sentence, because it comprises of many different countries, and each country has a very distinctive cultural histories and aesthetics. But having a one-stop shop where you can see the major players of Southeast Asia, I think that's really helpful. And I think over the years, there's been this discussion, or how Singapore should position itself. I think there's a lot of trial and error, but I think it's becoming clear that Singapore is establishing itself as a meeting point in Southeast Asia. And having said that, there have been some international, as in Western players, who keep returning, and such as White Cube, for example. I think White Cube has been doing quite well in Singapore because they keep coming back. And I think they also managed to cultivate these relationships locally in the region. And I think Singapore is a different place, so you can't really compare that with other places like Hong Kong. I think it takes longer in terms of like building relationships, and also I think people, they're more patient, so they're willing to take their time and wait. So for galleries that keep coming back and to invest in these relationships, and they're more successful, and I think we can see that just by looking at just how some of these galleries they keep coming back. There's a reason for that. And looking at the sales, so blue chip players like White Cube and Ropac, so they managed to come in 6-figure sales. And curiously, both galleries sold works by the Indian-born, London-based artist Rakib Shaw. And Sundaram Tagore, which has spaces in New York and Singapore, they also sold works in 6 figures. And then for other regional galleries, they're mostly selling works at 5-digit, or some are selling at 4-digit, especially Singaporean galleries. I think some of the I think there are some of the galleries that put out really impressive booths. I think one of the most eye-catching booths was a Singaporean gallery, Yo Workshop, because they presented a solo booth of Citra Sasmita, who's an artist from Bali, and she's also having a solo show at the gallery at Gillman Barracks in Singapore. So overall, I think it's a colorful addition. And I also met some young Singaporean artists, young and mid-career Singaporean artists, and I feel that they deserve more exposure just by talking with them. And they're very interesting and also very intelligent and worldly. And I hope I'll have a chance to introduce them more in different platforms.
You shared some sales highlights there, in particular from blue chip galleries. But from what you were able to hear and report on the ground, overall, how did sales look at the fair this year? Were galleries satisfied? Were some struggling to sell? Was it a mixed picture?
I think it's mixed, and I think in addition to the sales highlights that I mentioned, and in some galleries some galleries I spoke to, so they participated in the fair, maybe in the first edition, and they're returning this time after a 2-year break, and it took them longer to engage with the audience or potential buyers, and sometimes the sales may not happen on the spot, so there'll be a bit of follow-up work, and some they might be able to sell works like after the fair concluded. So it's a different kind of fair, and I think it's also a kind of different kind of pace.
So if we take a step back and aren't just focusing on this art fair week in Singapore, the city has seen a major influx of wealth over the last few years. To what extent is that fueling the growth of the art market in Singapore? And how mature does it feel today? How much has the art market there developed over the last few years?
I think over the years, Singapore has been making these controlled effort to try to build itself or make themselves more visible on the global art stage. And the great thing is they have a lot of resources, and also it has been attracting a lot of wealth from different places in the past years. Of course, the affluent Chinese and also also in recent years affluent Indians. And this is also something that it's something that I did not pay attention to previously, and but this time I spoke to an Indian collector who was telling me about how the influx of wealth from the Indian community, and I think that is really fascinating to me, and also in 2 weeks time, there will be Art Basel Qatar in Doha, and then India Art Fair. They're all going to be happening in the same week in February. So I understand that some of these collectors, the diaspora Indian community, and people who are interested in Southeast Asian art and South Asian art, they will go to they will have an onward journey. So we're starting out from Singapore, and then they'll go to Doha, and then Delhi. And I find this really interesting, and also going back to the fair, because the fair this year, they have a new section called South Asian Insights, and obviously it's trying to build this connection with South Asia, and I think it actually makes a lot of sense. So, and I think it also gives also some more leverage for Singapore, and so in terms of the market, is it more mature? I would definitely say so. And also by looking at other activities outside the fair. For example, this Hong Kong gallery called Gui Feng Hin, they opened a new outpost in Singapore. And so Gui Feng Hin specializes in high value blue chip 20th century works, mostly works by the likes of Zhao Wuqi, Lalande, and Zhi Deshun. So these pieces, I mean, there must be a market, right, in order to support this kind of, for the gallery to makes business sense to open an outpost in Singapore. And also Sotheby's, they also held their modern and contemporary art sale in the city-state on the same week, and this year they also did really well in terms of the total sales, and so the total sales they achieved a total $13 million, which is the highest sales total since 2023, and it was 35% up from last year. And the average sell-through rate was 94%, which is pretty successful. And also the blue chip names, David Hockney, Jagar Picasso, Tracy Emin, and Takashi Murakami, they're all sold 100%. And 93% of Southeast Asian art pieces they were sold. So if I look at these numbers, and also what this gallery Gui Feng Hin is bringing to Singapore, so obviously there is a demand for blue chip works, and there are also enough number of buyers who are who can afford these high value works. So the thing is I think the thing is whether for people from outside the region, if they want to establish themselves in Singapore or Southeast Asia as a whole, what kind of works are they bringing? Are they bringing the right works? And I think that's something that for galleries to really to think about.
And so before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about some of the major art capitals in Asia and the competitive landscape across the continent. We think about Hong Kong, Seoul, mainland China, Singapore. They're all competing for attention from collectors, galleries, curators. Where do you think Singapore now sits within this broader Asian art ecosystem?
I think in recent years, there's been a lot of changes in Asia as a whole. And I think that's what we covered in the Asia Pivot last year. At the beginning of exactly a year ago, I wrote about how we're looking at a bigger Asia, and that over the past 12 months, we're looking at all these new regions and new hubs emerging, like for example Central Asia, that's completely new, and then of course this gold rush in the Gulf region, and also Southeast Asia, and as on its own. So I think now, the way I look at Asia is a much more complex and much more diverse. There's no one central hub that serves everybody, because it's such a huge and complex and culturally diverse region. And I think Basel, Hong Kong is already so well established, and it will remain as the most important event in the region. But then other than that, there are other smaller hubs or cities that will serve other functions and serve different different groups of collectors and also industry practitioners. And so it will still be. I think it will remain as a key place, a key city, because of its cultural influence. I mean, the influence of Korean culture globally, and mainland China. It will remain an important story because of the size of the population, the size of the market. But then for other places, I think I would be paying more attention to South Asia and I think also the Gulf region, and I think there are these. Well, I'm looking at these new maybe cultural corridors that are in the making, in the process, and so, like what I wrote this week in the Asia Pivot, I talk about how this cultural corridor that connects Singapore, New Delhi, and Doha, and this is something. I think this is new, and of course we're looking at the rise of South Asian market, and especially India, and also Indian art on the global art market. Just look at the auction records from last year, and all these major institutional shows, so I think there's a lot of interesting things happening, and also changing dynamics. And I think Singapore, it's because it's a small place, so even though it is a very wealthy small place, but it's a small place at the end of the day. So Singapore has a very interesting role to play that bridges Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Gulf region. So I think it's a different dialogue that we're looking at. I think previously when we talk about Asia, then of course like China, right? And then Korea, and then Hong Kong seems to be like the Hong Kong is a hub for everybody. But I think now maybe this is going to change a little bit, and we're looking at a bigger Asian market or Asian markets, plural, because there are so many different regions. And I think Singapore, it will continue to serve as a meeting point for Southeast Asia. And we see collectors from the region that are setting up foundations. And in Singapore, for example, there's this Tanodo Foundation, and so they just opened their inaugural exhibition in Singapore last week, and Lo and Yan Wang, they also set up Kim Association, a small art space in Singapore. So I see that there could be more of these kind of private initiatives setting up in Singapore, but then at the same time, there are also patronage activities happening that will bridge the gap of these different subcontinents or sub-regions across a different part of Asia. So I think in the coming years it will be very interesting to see how these dynamics are changing. I think especially after Doha and India affair.
Absolutely. Well, that was a really incredibly informative breakdown of the region there. We appreciate it. Vivienne, thanks so much again for coming onto the podcast and sharing your recap and perspective on how the art fairs went this year in Singapore. If our listeners don't already, they should definitely check out all of your coverage in Artnet News. And where can we find you on social media to follow you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram. It's my handle is Miss Vivienne Chow.
Perfect. Thanks so much again, Vivienne. We appreciate it.
Thank you.